Labor Day in Alaska, most, tourist-oriented businesses and shops and things like that shut down or reduce operations. And, yeah. Okay, well, enough
We're
about me.
going until sunset. Sorry.
All right.
Nah.
Hey Dick, how you doing?
Tom did let me know he couldn't make it. So, I think this is it. Go ahead and start the meeting, reviewing the March and July minutes, I believe. Yes.
I have a question.
Yep.
Would I be a voting member tonight?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't make that explicit.
We're doing the March ones first.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I'll move to accept the March meetings minutes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mike seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Good one to check off there. And July. And it sounded like Will was working on the August minutes, and I may need to give him a hand with the May minutes, so I'll follow up on that. I got an email while I was gone.
I'll move to accept the July meetings minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Great. Okay. So first, and I think probably the biggest agenda item for tonight is the finalization of this draft management plan for Prospect Farm. Ken, thanks again for your work in shepherding this along. And do you want to lead the discussion on this?
Yeah, I mean, very briefly, you've all seen versions of this a number of times, so I won't go through it in great detail. The Association of Conservation, Conservation Commission Association for New Hampshire did have a webinar on Ebikes. I think you'd sent the thing out. I did watch it, and you can download it and watch it anytime you want. And I guess you watched a little bit of it, which I found very helpful, actually. Just, did I get all the laws and that sort of stuff correct here? I think in the former version, we had, two things. One is e-bikes are considered bicycles. They're not considered motorized recreation vehicles. So that's pretty clear. That comes through there. So that was something that I wasn't totally aware of. And that's in the state RSAs as well. So there's no, that question should be put to bed. And then many areas that are accepting e-bikes, it's still up to the individual land manager to say up or down as to whether or not they accept e-bikes or not. We had voted on what they call Class 1. If you remember, that's 750 watts or less. It can't go greater than 20 miles an hour. And Class 1s only work when you pedal assisted. Class 2 e-bikes are the same thing. The only difference is you do have a throttle that allows you to make the bike go without pedal assist. Many of the e-bikes being sold today are E2s. And most areas, it sounds like, are looking at E1s and E2s as the same thing. E3 can go up to 28 miles an hour, and they're sort of a miniature electric motorcycle, if you want to call it that, but they're not, because electric motorcycles like the Harleys, etc., can go about 100 miles an hour, whatever it is. I don't think we want to go to the E3, but it's very difficult to distinguish between an E1 and an E2 if you were just going to ask yourself about stopping.
Now, what's outside here? Are those e-bikes?
Those are bicycles.
Those are just
regular pedal?
Yeah, all pedal.
Work bicycle?
Yeah, it's, Dick, basically the batteries are about this long, this big, and that tall. You will see them mounted sometimes on the front part of the fork coming out through.
So how do you differentiate the E1, E2?
You basically have to stop the person and ask them and take a look at their controls. My wife actually has, her hand bike Eric had put a motor on it, and it's an E2, because if she gets to a real steep part where she can't crank fast enough, then that's when most people will just put it on to get them over the little hump. Because you're gonna consume your battery a heck of a lot faster if you're on the little throttle part. But it's just a little hand throttle, and on some bikes, you can have it on the handlebar.
Grip.
Yeah.
So hers is an E2?
Hers, yeah, actually, if I looked at it, I would call it an E2. And of course, you can run the bicycles without the motor on at all.
Right.
So you can do all of the above. That's the difference.
And now
One has the throttle, the other,
with the new modern kind of angles on bikes, like my bike out there, the blue one, it's really hard to tell that's an e-bike because they'll put the motor and the batteries actually down in the bottom bracket, right where the crank is. It's just enlarged, so your center of gravity is lower.
Oh, yeah.
So it's quite difficult to tell, but it's still, if you know what you're looking for, it's enlarged.
yeah.
And they weigh substantially more. And on an E2, you can disconnect on some bikes so that you can't actually use the E2 part. So if you were technically not allowed to ride an E2 bike, you could have it so you could show somebody like, well, I can't technically use that right now.
Is an E3 bike like really obvious? Like if someone was on an E3, would it be like,
They
oh, that
wouldn't.
guy's on a scooter?
Some of them, they don't even have pedals on some of them.
Gotcha. So it's
But I think an E2 can go to 28 miles an hour, and it's the E3 that goes beyond 28. Because that 28 is that European number that they used, which equates to whatever.
We
their-
can look it up
their
again,
speed.
but I think they have a governor on it. They should, which stops them at 20. I mean, like many of those things, if you want to override the governor, you
Yeah.
can. But my understanding, and I'd have to go back and look at the webinar again, but I think even in the state statutes, they're considered at 20.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's also tied in with the size. 750 watt motor is only going to do X. I suspect if you were on real flat pavement, you could probably accelerate.
Well,
things.
right, if you're pedaling, I think maybe if you're pedaling and you have it maxed out, it'll let you go 28. Maybe that's what I was saying, the motor won't kick out.
And downhill, you could
Right.
be on a regular bike and go
Right.
40 miles an hour, so it's not
Right.
like it's totally different.
Um,
But most of the bikes right now are E1 or E2 out there.
yeah. It just seems like it, I don't know, that's my preference. I still feel that in a lot of these areas, a person should be pedaling
Yeah.
to get the assist. That's my feeling now. Obviously, there could be a point where someone physically cannot pedal, or, and they,
I think a lot of your older folks that are out buying these bikes, when they hit something that's steeper, they might use a throttle for a few seconds.
But have you ridden one? Have you ridden an e-bike?
I've ridden I've used the hand cycle on my
Right,
bikes,
like
yeah.
if you begin pedaling, there's no need to hit the throttle. I mean, it assists you up the hill. You just start pedaling
Yeah.
and you're going up the hill. Like you can go up the Red Tail and all those trails in Hurricane,
Yeah,
just like not working hard at all pedaling. You're just
yeah.
it's not like you're like, oh, how am I gonna get this part? And you just start a pedal
Yeah.
stroke and the bike actually propels you.
I mean, the second question I ask myself on that is, I watch my wife when she's on her hand bike. If you're carrying a little bit of momentum into a steep section, if you slow down and really try to go, you tend to grind into the dirt more. If you're coming in with a little bit of momentum, then you'll actually, I think, create less erosion, contrary to what your popular thinking would be.
Right.
But you have that momentum, your
Right.
wheels are not stopping and starting
Right.
to spin.
Yeah.
So I think from an environmental point of view, in many cases, and this is even if it's pedal assist,
Right.
but I think there's this belief that an e-bike will go out there and just chew everything to bits. I don't think that's the case in most situations, and there's been many studies done now across the country that have shown the difference between a mountain bike and an e-bike relative to the amount of erosion, that sort of stuff, is actually less on an e-bike than it is on a mountain bike.
Well, maybe on the climb,
Yeah,
but certainly not on the descent.
descent is,
You're on a 60-pound bike as opposed to a 30-pound bike.
Yeah.
You can do that same trail 5 times versus.
but people on an e-bike
Once or
typically
twice.
aren't going to be going high speed, just
Right, but I'm
That
just saying,
clientele,
you know, from a
yeah,
national standpoint, not just prospect, we're gonna say like throughout the country.
Yeah.
If you ride an e-bike on a trail that's meant for mountain biking, you're descending, you're certainly carrying
Yeah.
much more wheel and
But I was just taking the input from, you know, these are land trust and that sort of stuff, and conservation commissions and other places. And, each can do what they want. We discussed E1, and, you know, my general sense, and particularly looking at the number that's sold and how you try to go out and differentiate between an E1 and E2.
yeah, I don't think you can.
And I don't think most people who own an E2 use the throttle most of the time. It's gonna be, I mean, I know my wife rarely uses it, but there's a few times that she needs it, so she'll use it, but, so that is one difference. I just wanted to make sure that we were at the E1, you know, based on my watching that webinar, but others can watch and make a suggestion on that.
Yeah, I think that's the way, it's gonna progress, even if we were to be slow and moving in that direction,
Yeah.
saying we're E1, it's like,
There's definitely a big jump between E1, E2s over to E3s.
yeah,
And many places will not allow an E3, but they'll leave. Because, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where there's a concern where you're on like a bike path, like a rail to trail. And, you know, there was the concern about, well, these guys will come zipping by me, but the reality is many bike riders without an e-motor will be riding 20 miles an hour.
oh yeah.
So it's not like, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a little startling to be passed by an e-bike going uphill.
Yeah.
Because they can be going 20 miles an hour.
It's like,
That
well,
happens to
yeah,
me all the time.
It's pretty like, whoa. Like,
is
what,
he going here hard?
like what just happened?
That's all the time going up Carter Notch.
Yeah,
That's all the time. I went there on my wife's mountain bike from 6th grade. Right?
yeah,
And there's like a bunch of 20-year-olds with red bikes starting to do
Yeah.
at the corner. And they're like, "Arrgh."
yeah,
And you're like, oh.
yeah.
Okay, another aspect of the e-bikes, I talked to Jeff a little about. I just came from another resort area that rents a lot of bikes. They do rent the e-bikes, and I saw these guided tours going out on the e-bikes. So if we get to that commercial aspect of biking, what are we going to enforce?
I suspect that your question is actually broader than e-bikes. It's one that we never even thought about, but the commercial use of Prospect Farm. Period.
Yeah, well, we've
You know, guided
covered
nature
a lot
hikes.
of areas
Yeah.
to regulate Prospect Farm, and I think that the commercial use is something we should discuss.
Well, can a guide bring a hunter hunting on Prospect Farm?
But I don't think that the guys are bringing sports in from out of town.
Might on the moose hunt.
Right, but regardless, it's still
Yeah.
I think it's the same
out-of-town,
question in
in-town,
some
it's
ways,
the same
yeah.
question.
Can you do that in
Could you
know,
be
in
a
the
guide
forest, in the
and,
national
I
forest?
think it's a lot more
I think you need a special permit.
There's an outfitter's permit you're supposed to get.
Yeah.
possible for an e-biker to create a tour group to go up there and say, oh, we'll go up, Carter Notch Road, and we got all this, we'll have scenery, and then we'll have vistas, and, it would be a great promotion. Do a video of it, and get on one of the outlets.
and someone could do that for birding?
So, I mean, I guess it kind of sounds like you agree with this, Ken, that there might be an additional section that we should have in here that would cover an e-bike tour potentially, and would cover something like just an
Yeah, I mean, a
outdoor.
person could be an outdoor guide who brings people
Guiding.
snowshoeing. In the
Right.
winter and charges for it, it's not part of the Jackson Ski Tour.
Because we actually have that happen at the Jackson Falls. When you have weddings and stuff, you have professional photographers and all that sort of stuff going
Right.
out there.
Right.
I think Town of Eaton, Town of Conway, I think they do have permit application processes for like for instance for Foss Mountain, if you're gonna
Yeah.
have a wedding or a wedding photo shoot up there, I think they do have permits or fees that you're supposed to pay in order to do that. And similarly, I remember reading a couple of years ago that the town of Conway, when REI first came to town, they wanted to do tours in Whitaker. And I think they had to get a special permit from the town of Conway. And so there might be language there that we could borrow.
Or do we just want to prohibit? Because we're trying to reduce the usage, intense usage of the Prospect Farm.
I think you want a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah,
than-
I don't know how you manage that.
Yeah.
In the sense that someone could be like, well, we came through Prospect Farm and now our destination is actually here. Like, then what do you do? It's like, well, you have to get a permit to bring people across that property.
In the end, I think the town may need to think of a broader
Maybe
policy.
that's what you get a special permit
Right.
for, to pass through. I'm just throwing it out.
Yeah.
Well, and so, there is an existing agreement between Jackson Ski Touring and the town.
Yeah, and that's a
Right.
nonprofit.
Right.
That's
Right.
correct.
Right.
And normally they're not doing lessons there because they're doing the lessons down here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, people are up there skiing,
Right.
and that's a special.
It would definitely, it's not, I think it's a good idea. It's just brings in a lot of periphery kind of like, which is
So if
probably
they
good.
pull up with a bus and offload, a bunch of people.
Well, what happens if the AMC comes in and starts a hike from there with the bus? Like, what's that called?
Has the AMC ever done that?
Colleges do, is that commercial?
Well, I think when a college comes in, that, it gets kind of fuzzy, but like, you have the freshman class orientations that take hikes and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. I don't,
We could put something in here that just reserves the right to create the town of Jackson reserves the right to create like a special use permit for
Yeah.
guided trips that originate and terminate on town lands or something like that. So we might not, this seems like this is probably going to be a much bigger discussion, but at least it's in the plan that,
and it's
we
broader
reserve
than
the right-
Prospect Farm.
Right.
As part of the management plan, like we reserve the right to create, a special use permit or whatever kind of language you want to say for it, for guided trips that originate and terminate on land, or on town land.
Originate or terminate?
Or I would say originate, I'd say originate and terminate, because I don't think like if you hike up to Carter Notch Hut and then you like hike down the back, you just had to hike down the backside. Like,
Right.
do we think that everyone needs to get a special permit to walk that,
Right.
quarter mile? That seems like over regulation maybe. But if you're like, hey, we're gonna do like an all-day birding thing, or we've got a dog sitting and I'm gonna take 15 dogs up there
Right, and do it 4 times a month.
and do it, every
For
every
4 months.
Friday, then that's like the kind of thing where it's like, okay, I could see that needing
Yeah.
a permit versus like,
Let me try this, is just language that's very simple. It says, commercial use on Prospect Farm requires an agreement with the town of Jackson, because I think it's the selectmen that would have to do the agreement,
Yeah.
not this board.
I think that leaves room for flexibility in terms of what that agreement actually looks like on a case-by-case basis. It may be very simple for a particular use. It
The
may
Ski Touring
require
Foundation
something.
has an agreement with the town.
Right.
Right.
And it's a little different because there's a lot of reciprocal as opposed to cash flowing between those two.
And if the town wanted to make it a more streamlined process, they could say a special permit, so an agreement or special permit.
I would just put it, because then you need a definition of what an MOU is, and you need a definition of, and I'm not sure we want to, the one thing I struggle with this is, I started putting in all the graphs that you had from the questionnaire, et cetera, and then all of a sudden this is a 30, 40, 50, 60-page document.
I would just also like to jump in. I don't think we have the complete document here.
You mean that was copied?
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're missing the section that had the recommendations, right? Or am I like, no?
Yeah, I was looking through too.
Well, we just go to page 11.
I have the old one.
Is there a photocopy machine there?
I'm glad you said that, Ben. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh,
Well, yeah,
That's
that's,
the substance.
Mainly the background
no.
information.
So it stops at page 11.
yeah.
That's weird. Well, I don't know what happened in your copy.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody got a copy of this in the email. I hope it probably
Yeah,
did
yeah.
that before.
Yeah, I looked through that, that's why it was,
Hey, something's missing here, yeah. I don't know what to say about that. I know one of the Julies was out today, so I don't know. And I suspect she probably threw it in and.
It says, I don't know if everyone else says PCL XL error on the back. I don't know if that happened, and it's just unclear that the whole document didn't print.
Yeah, well, I can't answer because I wasn't here. But,
Yeah, yeah.
In theory, we're supposed to have covered. Do you want me to add that section? Commercial use on Prospect Farm requires an agreement with the town of Jackson.
I think it does make sense to have something, at least addressing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think other towns do
It's
have.
not saying no.
Right,
And the camping does say that if somebody, like a Boy Scout troop wanted to come in, which is a quasi-commercial use like anything else, they can come to the selectmen and ask permission to do an overnight. Otherwise, there's no camping up there, but it requires permission from the selectmen to, at least that's my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay,
that makes sense.
add that. I think that's a good catch. Thanks, Dick.
That's what vacations are for.
I guess also a slight addendum to that, being like if, because of the mixed nature of the property and there's commercial activities going on, that would also be covered by the Forest Services commercial, because they wouldn't have, so I think just pointing out that it's more complicated, but also that
Yep.
we're in the same vein as what the Forest Service would require. But just looking real quickly, they do have applications, and it's a,
For commercial use.
yeah.
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 Yeah, it's the blue card. You have to have a-
Yeah, and of course, this gets a little funky because currently, if somebody came in on the Forest Service and had a permit from the Forest Service and they started at the parking lot is actually on Prospect farmland, it's not on Forest Service land.
Right.
And I don't think we want to get down to getting into the weeds.
No,
about
we don't
that.
have a problem,
Yeah,
yeah. I think this is good because it says that we're aware that if it starts to be taken advantage of, we have something, we don't have to sit down and have a new
Yeah.
meeting, scratch our heads and say, oh, we should have thought of this.
Right.
then it becomes a question of the terms of the agreement as opposed to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Other changes, I did have this section in here earlier about the selectmen recently had okayed the continuation of the stump dump up there. I took that history out. Obviously, when we present this draft to the selectmen, we'll verbalize it. But I thought as this thing moved forward, it didn't make sense to have that written here. I mean, currently, it says it's there. I know that Tim Nolan rightly recommended not to have the stump dump up there. And in addition, I did take a look when I was up there last time. The knotweed is coming back again. I mean, there's a bunch of sprigs coming up. And of course, the Forest Service has some pretty stringent conditions. You have to have your machinery checked. You can't bring in any foreign soils. You've got drainage ditches up there. That place is ripe for knotweed to run right down those roads. Boom.
And right to the river.
Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately, when the selectmen made that decision, I wasn't able to make that meeting. But I think we should go in and make the case that, you know, everything in common sense says this is not the right place for us. Not that Jackson can't look for another place, but this is about as wrong a place as you could possibly put a stump dump.
And there are businesses that will grind up stumps.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they charge you or if they actually just grind them so they can have the material.
I don't know.
So there's
but,
alternatives. That's what I'm saying.
But this isn't theoretical. It's, in fact, that knotweed should be treated pretty quick because that stuff is explosive when it gets going again. I know it was treated, 1 year ago, 2 years ago?
There's two.
Yeah. But normally you're gonna need 3-4 treatments before you finally kill the full root system up there. So I did knock out that history, and I think it's better to, because it doesn't change what's here, which is currently is permitted. And, you know, our recommendation is to go elsewhere with that. I did add, let's see, the fireworks regulation wasn't in here the last time, and I just inserted that in here. So that's one of the other minor changes. Most of what I'm telling you is going to be editorial. I did, and Ben, thanks, because I know you went through it and gave me some edits and so forth, and I think I picked up all of those. And then I did not put the version before said I was going to put all the town ordinances in here. That was starting to make this thing a tome. And I think to be an effective document, we want to try to watch the size of it as well. Or nobody will read it, and then they'll come back and say, I didn't know. But I just wouldn't recommend putting a 40 or 50 page document out there. And then on the only other thing I did is the recommendation on negotiating a long-term agreement with the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation and taking a look at cost savings. I think that was in the cross-country skiing. It seemed to be a more appropriate recommendation actually in the recommendation section back here. And as we discussed on that one, you know, the town plows almost up to the parking lot and then stops, and then Jackson pays to have somebody go up and actually do it. Vice versa, the Ski Touring Foundation has its work crew out there. They could do all the mowing and the clearing, as opposed to the town now hiring somebody with a private contractor. The recommendation here is just to have those conversations to see whether there's cost savings. It's not saying what the answer is. It's just recommending that, you know, this might be something where both entities actually come out with the same income, with outcome, with the same, with cheaper cost. And it could be that people just decide not to do it, but
Right.
I think it's worth looking at. Then on the questionnaire, I first started to put in the PowerPoint summary that you put in there, but then when you put all the taxpayer and so on and so forth, and you try to make it so it's readable, all of a sudden you're adding another 5 or 6 plus pages. So I just put the all here, because the differences between those groups, even though some people were concerned that it might have been biased by one group versus another, I think when we looked at these things in January or February, we pretty much agreed for the most part. The one big difference was a lot of the visitors didn't recognize when they were leaving town boundaries. And many people even in town who, you know, that part of that question said, did you know about this until you looked at the map that we gave to you?
Right.
And many of the townspeople said, I didn't even know the difference. So that was, and that's not a substantive difference relative to policies and so forth. So this, and we could ask the question, do we even want this questionnaire result in here?
I think maybe having it on hand or included during any public information sessions
The whole
that
thing.
we have, potentially, or just that,
Yes,
and being
yeah.
able to clearly state that or show that, you know, that all of the answers, whether it was taxpayers, residents, or visitors, aligned, other than
Yeah.
the awareness of the boundaries, which didn't have a big impact on any of the recommendations made. So I don't know whether it needs to be included in with the plan, but as we're
It's
rolling it
occupying
out,
3 pages right now as an
Yeah.
appendix. And this is just a presentation question. It's,
I mean, I like having the data there just as to show that we did our due diligence.
Okay.
About, you know, seeking input from people, and this is kind of what we're basing our responses around, or
Yeah.
shaping some of our policies.
okay. I concur with you on that. I think, you know, we're going through this in a very stepwise fashion, and I think it does show that we did our diligence as well. If there's, I don't know whether we're going to get serious questions. Any other changes that people have or suggestions going through this? then Jeff, what I would recommend is that we vote as a commission to accept this draft, to move to the selectmen to get their input. It's not a final that's coming out of here. And then the second question would be is when we go to the selectmen, we would be recommending that this go on the town warrant? Or are we recommending that they just accept it and it becomes a policy at that level? The challenge with the latter, as I think we mentioned, is this recommends that snowmobiling right now is permitted up there, and that gets kind of legally all mixed up because, you know, the town voted in 70, whatever it was, yes on snowmobiling, but with conditions. Then the town later votes no on snowmobiling. And then there's a petition to say yes on snowmobiling, but they never extinguish the conditions from the 72. So when you go back to look at those conditions, it's like mountain biking. It's basically saying is if somebody wants to come in and build a separate trail system, it's open for discussion. But mixing snowmobiling with cross-country skiing up there is, it's a safety issue because if you have snowmobilists going up and people coming down the Orchard Trail, that's an accident waiting to happen. And number two is there's no legal place to park and even start a snowmobile on Prospect Farm right now. Unless somebody could drive up, drop it off. They can't use the Ski Touring Foundation's parking lots for that, so they'd have to drive back into town and then walk back up to get on their snowmobile legally. But this is extinguishing, if it's a town warrant and it passes, it would extinguish the petition vote that went through a number of years back.
So no snowmobiling if this passes.
That's, if this is made into a town warrant and after the selectmen and after the, because we're gonna have an open meeting with the public as well. And obviously this could change during that, but as it stands right now, that's the way that this is written.
Well, snow machines are for town residents only. They already put that in.
Was that, yeah, I hadn't gone back and looked at it, yeah.
As far as safety, mountain bikes coming downhill, they're quiet. People hiking uphill, maybe looking down, watching their feet. There is some safety factor there. So I don't think that it's apples for apples. I think there is some awareness that we'd have to instill for mountain bikes up there.
Yeah.
And not that they're not careful, I believe they are.
I think,
But,
yeah. And this is not to disagree, but I think there's two other differences. Is Ballantine allows bikes, and the Forest Service allows bikes. The Forest Service in that section does not allow snowmobiles, and Ballantine does not allow snowmobiles. And to try to prevent or keep the goodwill with the neighbors, because we are dependent on the neighbors up there. And the reality is the only place you could snowmobile would be basically up to Hall's Ledge and back. Because when you go the short distance out the Quail, you're on Forest Service land. You go the short distance out Boggy Brook, and then you're on Forest Service land. That's all illegal.
Right, you can only go, it's so short.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference of motorized vehicle, well, I mean, recreational vehicle that can travel long distances quickly, which a mountain bike can't. But there are also the abiding landowner differences between those two.
Yeah, I mean.
I think that also with snow machines, we haven't had a problem.
Yeah.
There isn't a pressure to use it. It's there, it's written, a town resident could go up there somehow, whatever they work out for parking, but it hasn't been an issue because there's no place to go.
Yeah.
But why?
You can't go into the national forest. All you could do is ride around in little circles at Prospect Farm. And that's not what snow machining today is about. It's about trail riding for many miles
Yeah.
from Errol to Colebrook or, whatever it is. But that's what they like to
Yeah.
do.
Go out the Mountain Bond Road and take off
Right,
from
but
there.
why don't we just make it so we don't have to have this conversation
Yeah.
every 3 years, just to say that no one's gonna do it, so. We make comparisons, that there's no comparison between a hiker and a mountain biker and a bunch of people on skis on a slippery trail and a snowmobile. You can't get off a snowmobile and walk it. You can't pick up a snowmobile and put it on your shoulder and carry it past somebody. A person on skis may not be able to ski when they're going down or up, but they certainly can walk it. So I think it's more like a walker and a skier is a bad comparison, in terms of like.
I'm not trying to defend snow machines, but
Let line dogs lie is what you're.
I don't think it's an issue, although
Yeah.
it might be ripe for a vote again and
Right.
just say, no, well, it's time to do away with it.
Yeah.
There's no need for it, there's not any
Well, I think that's kind of where it comes into. It's like at this point, it just feels like there's really no need for it. We're almost just saying it so we don't get the hair up on people's necks because they just want to be told that, well, if I really want to.
We'd have to weigh that out, whether we put it for a vote on snow machines or leave it alone and not build up the animosities for the rest of the program, which is going to be, a really good document.
Do you think there are a lot of people out there that would get excited about something that's trying to eliminate snowmobile?
No, I don't think there's a lot of people that would stand up and try to defend it, but as we know, those voices can be very loud.
Mhm.
That's a while ago.
So maybe we don't want to touch it right now, or, that's something to think about.
The other thing that's worth noting, I think, is that in the survey, again, I think there was quite an overwhelming number of people that said no motorized use
Yeah.
at Prospect Farm. And so I think maybe there were 2 or 3 that said yes to motorized use, but largely, again, whether it was residents, visitors, taxpayers, whatever it was, I think it was pretty overwhelmingly a no to motorized use.
I like the idea of it being voted on by the town. I just think it gives people buy-in and it feels transparent.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's precedent for that. I feel like the other times we've done things like that, it's been town votes.
Well, one of the ways I appreciate what you're saying, Dick, is you could put the whole thing at risk because there's a few people who are addicted to this issue and they could deep six this, if I'm understanding correctly what you're saying here. We can leave it the way it is, which is the way it was when we finished this last draft, or we could proceed with this. If we leave it the way it is, it doesn't mean we won't change it before we put it on the town warrant. Because we're going to go to the selectmen, and then we're going to hold a public hearing on this. And if there's loud output at the public hearing on this, we can change it at that
Right.
point
Pull it
before
out.
you put it and pull it out and put it on the
I think
warrant.
I still think it's worth presenting.
Starting with this as a base and see what happens.
That's just a common sense and maybe some education of what you're actually.
Yeah,
Some people don't understand, like we said, what Prospect Farm really is. Like, do you understand what you get to do?
it was pretty clear that most people didn't know where the
And what
boundaries
you
were.
have to do to
Yeah,
get the snowmobile there to be able to do this?
Yeah.
Still sound like fun? Yeah, I'm sure some people will say yes, but we've never seen them
Okay.
show up.
So we'll proceed with this, but be sensitive to what Dick is
Yeah, I think it's good advice.
suggesting that we take a look at.
Or be prepared for.
Right.
Yeah, and, if that starts to surface, then we can pull it at that time or modify it. But again, this is not set in stone yet because we have 2 more steps
Mhm.
to go through, which is one, the selectmen, to see what suggestions they give us, and then after the selectmen. So the next step then, I think, would be is I can finalize this. I can send everybody, the modified verbiage real quick. Otherwise, this pretty much stays as is. And then who would want to go? I'm happy to go present it to the selectmen at one of their meetings. I just have to take a look at what their schedule is and who else would like to join me with that.
I can attend. I think you're probably the best person to speak for the plan.
Yeah.
You know it through and through. So I think I'm happy to
Okay.
be there for it.
Yeah, maybe just notify us all that what meeting.
This is the date.
What meeting it'll be.
that we've set it up
if I'm
with.
available.
Okay, great.
Happy to attend.
And then, I think at one point we talked about also just showing it to the Forest Service, not that I think we're gonna get any pushback from what we have here, but, they are, and, you know, the intent of the donor actually was to try to integrate as much as possible with the Forest Service. And, I mean, I guess I feel pretty strongly we ought to be following the intent of the original town vote, and the donor in particular.
I like that.
There's nothing worse than knowing when you die, people just change everything, you know, contrary to your written instructions, but, yeah.
Even though you are dead.
And then, yeah, even though you're dead. The only other thing I'm gonna change is, I spent a gazillion hours, I only had a PDF of the Jackson ski touring map, and I thought it was instructive to keep it here, so that people can get a real good sense of how the trail system, the bulk of it actually moves out onto the Forest Service property. It was in a PDF, and if you ever try to move a PDF document into Word, you know, the formatting gets lost and all that, and then I realized, this morning I woke up and I said, hell, I have the little map, all I have to do is put it in my printer, tell it to print it out as a JPEG as opposed to a PDF, and then it's easy to insert. And when I finalize this to send to the selectmen, I will put it in a PDF format, so that, you know, most people, when you're moving these documents at that point, you don't want it so it can be changed, you know, people start rewriting it the way they want
Right.
at that point. So, shall we take a vote?
That makes sense. So the motion would be to have Ken finalize this draft with the edits we've discussed tonight, and to move it forward to the select board for their initial review.
Yep.
Okay. So is there someone to make that motion? Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Great.
Any opposed? Should always ask.
Any opposed?
There you go.
Anybody abstaining? You gotta do all three.
Okay, all right, noted. Okay, thanks, Ken, again.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
A lot of work there.
Yep.
Okay, anything else for Prospect Farm?
I just saw the lot was fully packed this weekend. And Valentine actually had his camper in the, what we call the Jackson Ski Tour parking.
It's his land.
Yeah, it was just, I typically park there. And I decided not to, because, well, first I wasn't sure it was him, but I figured it was, and it was. So, just so we know, you know, he's probably one,
He comes up pretty much every
No.
summer and
yeah, not loving that
spends
corner
some time,
spot.
yeah.
But is it, can you park there in the summer usually? Or is it just winter parking? For the
No,
for Valentine's?
The Ski Touring Foundation only has permission
Yeah.
for the winter.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've
that
never
was-
seen any of you, I've never
And there's no
seen him
sign
give
that
any
says-
pressure.
yeah.
He's well signed, things he doesn't want you to do, and I think if he didn't want you to be there, he would put a sign.
I asked him once, I said, is it okay? Because I park there all the time too.
Mm.
And he was like, I don't mind. He's like, I prefer we not advertise it. Like, don't tell people like, oh, this is where you can park. But he's like, if you want to park here, it's
Yeah,
fine with me.
that's what I think.
And of course, our recommendation in the summer is to take the stump dump, because it's all pretty well flattened out, and just make that an additional parking lot and moving the Forest Service gate out. The only reasons why the gate is where it is now is to prevent illegal access to the stump, unauthorized access to the stump dump.
Right.
But that parking lot, I don't know who goes up there frequently, but that little 6 car parking lot is filled very frequently.
So if you
Yeah.
got rid of the stump dump, you wouldn't need the gate anymore?
Well, you would to keep people from getting beyond.
Because the Forest Service doesn't want
Then you
vehicle
just
access
drive the
past
whole
that
road.
point. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, moving on to Jackson Falls. seems like it's time now to do our work day that we put off earlier in the summer, even though it rained for the whole month of July.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Did
of
we
course.
do wood chips this year?
We did wood chips, we didn't do the plantings.
Oh,
We had
right.
put those off because the experience the last couple of years had been, we planted them and then it didn't rain for 2
Right.
months and watering was difficult.
Problematic.
Yeah, so, I'm happy to send out a poll if that would be easier for people to choose between several different dates, or if anyone thinks we can decide on one tonight, I'm happy to do that too, but my sense is it's always easier to sit down and look at your calendar and pick a few and then see what works best for everyone.
Yeah, I like a poll.
Okay.
And I was thinking that we should try the checkerboard type of thing I was talking about before, where you take the sod and you don't butt them up against each other, except maybe for the perimeter. And then see if, and put soil in between, and see if the plants don't grow into it instead. So it basically
Runners.
it expands the territory we can cover for the same amount.
Yeah.
You know, I walked it, 2 or 3 nights ago, just took a look at it. Number one is, the 2 transplant sites have done very, very well.
Yeah.
I mean, they,
Very good.
Yeah.
so if anybody goes down there. And I guess I would ask the question is, we have a system that is working very, very well. You get into, the problem with the checkerboard is you have a lot of edge effect. And if you get into a dry period of something real quick before it really gets established, you cover more territory, and maybe long-term you may get to where you want, but you're also running the risk of losing the whole show in a dry period. I mean, my thought is, there isn't that much more to cover with sod when you go through there. The stuff down near the river is, when the river gets high, it's gonna take that stuff out. It's the same stuff as when we put the wood chips down there. You can wood chip those areas, but you're gonna see them flush out every time we have a high water event. The one area that to me looked like that made the most sense was the second area that we did, when you came down from the handicapped, it's immediately on your right, is that could be extended out further. I think you would accelerate that out. The other areas are, I don't know what other people thought, but as I looked at it, it was pretty good growth. And I think some of that's also a fact that this year the use there, because of the parking limitation, changed the volume of use dramatically. So we may not be fighting City Hall the way we were before those parking limitations came. I don't know what others are. That was just my observation when I went out there.
Yeah, my only thought is that if we continue on the right-hand side, where we did the plantings last year, is that you're getting more and more under the hemlocks, and so it might be a little bit, and there's not much sun. I mean, it'll look good, but I'm not sure how it will.
I asked myself the same question. I wouldn't even put this as highest priority.
Yeah.
To me, the area that was highest priority is to get wood chips on the part that we did not wood chip, as opposed to the sodding. And there, I think if we put 2 loads down at the lower parking lot, because that whole area doesn't have wood chips on it, we just ran out of wood chips.
And remember, what we were told to do with the wood chips was for the paths to cover the roots.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put the wood chips everywhere, people walk everywhere. That's the only problem with that.
No, I was thinking, well, remember we were gonna do, when you leave the parking lot, at the south end of the parking lot, or the most downstream part, there is this trails that go out there. Those still need wood chips, because they are trails, and there's exposed roots and everything. And also when you leave the parking lot at the north end, when you go down where the emergency place is as well, that is still all exposed. And that's why I was gonna suggest 2 loads in the lower, because then it makes it easy to just wheel them down and put them in. And then the other area is because you now have the Jackson parking up where the porta potty is. There's parts of that, and then when you leave Valley Cross Road from the bridge and you come down, that's all exposed coming down. To me, those were if you ask me where the highest priority areas for work would be to get another load or 2 dumped near the porta potty, so that you could do that area up there. And then I think, people are not stepping over those little wire fences we're putting out there,
Yeah.
et cetera. They're working. If we're concerned about people spreading out, but I would only wood chip. And if there's areas where we're worried about them walking off, I would suggest we try the fencing first.
Yeah,
But you are getting natural growth coming back since the pressure from the hiking. And the problem is when you have too many people there, they spread out and you get more damage. The controlled parking that's happening now means you don't have as many people there, so they're not spreading out the way they used to. I don't know what others' perceptions were, but those were my perceptions from this summer.
I find that there's more use down south than there is north because people tend to stay where the cars are.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Which is really
For
nice
sure.
for me because I always hang out up by the bridge, so.
Yeah.
Less traffic. But I was thinking that if we do the sod this year, this fall, which is what we were thinking, although
Yeah.
we want to do chips, that, if we do the sod, that I would just add on to the existing part that's there, that's closest to the water.
Down where the picnic table is.
No, where where the handicap parking area is.
Yeah, yeah.
That area that we got the 2 seasons on there now, and just add a 3rd season, so that it would be, because I understand what you're saying about not doing the checkerboard.
Yeah.
But I would just add on to that, because I think I'd rather not create islands where if you're
Yeah,
gonna pick
yeah.
another little section, so you just add on. And then the other part was down by the second picnic table, because that area is so chewed up.
Yeah, I thought there was
Yeah.
one other area that we talked about.
And that's the one I was thinking about.
And I'm not saying not do sod, I'm just simply saying if I was to prioritize what we had time for,
Yeah.
I would prioritize the wood chips over the sod, but that doesn't make them exclusionary.
Right, but we have done wood chips this year already.
Yeah.
Right, so we did a bunch of that, and maybe we could do more of it in the spring, if we don't have time to do it in the fall. But the sod, I think we just want to try it in the fall and see how it went in terms of survival and that sort of thing, and not having to water.
Mhm.
Well, if we want wood chips,
You can get wood chips.
Ryman's
Yeah,
away, but
Ryan's
there's another,
coming, so.
I have another person who's been dropping them, but we just changed where he's currently dropping them.
Yeah.
So, just give me a heads up, I can,
And somebody who doesn't get the knotweed in their stuff.
no, they're just cutting trees.
Yeah.
I mean, I can make sure that they're not, clearing out weed
Yeah.
patch.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, just a heads up, because they're not always working in Jackson as much as Ryman is. And it's just if we can decide where they get dropped, in a timely manner, because I know sometimes if we drop them, it's in the way.
And then we
We
get
don't always
trouble.
have control.
Or we have to cart them long distances when it's
Right.
unnecessary, because we just have to dump at a different location.
Yeah,
Right,
so
yeah.
slower parking lot would definitely
If we
make
can just
sense.
get that kind of
Mm.
figured out, that would be good.
So I guess it'd be the lower lot, and then somewhere up near, but not in the Jackson resident space.
I think you could almost dump them where the trail takes off right from the bridge on Valley Cross. I think you could back up and dump a little there. Load it too. And just far enough off so it's not blocking that trail coming down. Because they may sit there for a week or 2 hours. And, fall season, you're gonna get a lot of people in there.
Yeah. I know, it's tough.
Okay, I'll send out a poll. I still have a list from earlier in the year of a couple other little things that we talked about that we wanted to do out there as well. So I can follow up on that, and I think that had the locations of where we wanted sod and wood chips and things like that. So I'll make sure we're not forgetting anything there. Pam, are you still able to contact the suppliers and arrange that?
Mhm.
And then have you spoken with Bob recently?
He said he's more available in the fall, so I'll
Okay.
follow up with him, but I need to have some dates so I can
Yeah.
check and see. And it was good that we didn't actually do the sod when we wanted to, because his little bobcat was in the shop,
Oh, okay.
so.
Gotcha.
That made a world of
That
difference.
made a huge difference, yeah.
Supposed to try and drag that stuff down.
So I'll check with Bob, and I think he can make himself available.
Okay. Yeah, if there are particular times, I guess, that work well for him, that'd be good to know, and then I
Yeah,
can
that would be good.
structure the poll around that.
Yeah.
And what's the status of the kiosk? I've had a couple people on the Jackson Falls committee. Where's the kiosk?
Yeah. The status is I had been talking to one contractor who was going to be able to do it and has kind of said a couple of times that it still seems possible for this year, but that he kind of get back to me on exactly when. And so I'm actually going to see him tomorrow.
Okay.
I can check again. If it seems more like it's not going to be possible this year, I don't know what we would want to do. Would we want to just wait until next year? Or would we want to look into other contractors? I mean, we're obviously getting pretty close to
Yeah, I know. Man.
ground freezing, and
We're pretty busy, but is there a PDF like of exactly what they're building?
I think so, somewhere. I thought maybe
If it's
you
the
had
same,
sent it
is
over.
it the same one? Is it that same
I
one?
believe so.
Yeah, we've got everything. We've got
Would
a
you mind-
25-page document.
Would you send it to me again?
Yeah.
I could ask one of my guys if they just were like, hey, you guys want to just bang this out?
I think it would be real fast.
Yeah.
I think it would be super.
If you don't mind
super quick.
sending it to me, that'd be
No,
awesome.
I can do that.
I could look. I'm sure I might have it someplace, but if it's on the top of the list, I go,
Yeah, no, I can get
oh,
those.
it's gonna take us. Let's just do it.
Um,
So,
And we do have funding approved, or a withdrawal approved for that already,
Okay.
and the sod and all that, so that's been in place since earlier in the summer.
yeah, sometimes it's nice just get done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We still have to pick up a bunch of peat moss and stuff like that, and hopefully they still have it,
Well, the
Yeah.
Paris Farmers does. They
Yeah.
seem to be sitting pretty
right?
fat right now.
All right. Anything else for Jackson Falls? Okay. Anything for Gray's Inn? I haven't seen or heard anything recently about the conceptual development idea for that property. I don't know if anyone else has. I haven't been. I'm not super up to date with the planning board minutes,
No,
but
I haven't seen anything come through
Yeah.
there, so.
Trail needs a little bit of work. I keep saying I'm gonna clear a couple trees and I climb over them. That's about it. Yeah, there's
The ski train foundations
they'll come through.
probably would, yeah, I mean, that would be on there.
Yeah,
You're talking about the ones that,
yeah, mystery loop and
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's just a mystery.
I don't think they go up and do the
The upper.
upper ones, yeah, they may. I know that the
Spend a
stuff
lot of
that
time in there.
they groom occasionally, they would go through. And
Yeah.
that won't happen until probably another,
Yeah, if I'm in the mood, I usually just go through it and saw and
Yeah.
clear it up. I feel like I've missed it for like 2 years, and there's not a lot, but I think there's 2 trees.
How big?
I can't remember.
Would you
but-
need a chainsaw, or could you just?
No, you would ideally think you would want a chainsaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking about giving Mr. Marshall the 5.6 over there.
Oh yeah.
Thinking his 5th, 6th graders out
Well, you
there.
know what? If I
Clearing trail, he would love to do that. That would be something they would.
next time I go through, I'll make a better mental note.
Yeah. Probably can't give him chainsaws, but.
Yeah, I got an electric one.
okay. I included a note there for Wildcat River. Mike, I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
take this one.
I can talk briefly about that. So we, Jeff had mentioned the Rivers Network had grant money opportunity for educational and restoration work on wild and scenic rivers, and so I wrote a grant maybe 3 weeks ago, and it got accepted. And so it's a collaboration between Tin Mountain, Upper Saco, all of you, and the Jackson Conservation Commission are also community partners. Jackson Grammar School and the Forest Service, and it was awesome. So we're going to have money that we are going to pay for several field trips with Jackson Grammar students to various sections of the river. So I can tell you, it's already there. We've already got dates. So in the next 2 to 3 weeks, The 2-3 and the 3-4 are going to be meeting with William Abbott, very graciously agreed to head out there. So Dexter is going to take them up to the middle of the river. And so the idea is that we're having students that are going to visit the headwaters, the middle, and at the end. And they're going to visit there with community partners. So the middle section is going to be Upper Saco, and it'll take place on Upper Saco Valley land easements. So probably most likely Lori Kinsey's property. And they'll do some riparian ecology, they'll do some water quality monitoring, kind of just a general health with the 3-4 and the 2-3 in that area. They're also going to have a field trip, I think, with 3-4 and possibly also K1 coming down here and meeting the Jackson Conservation Commission. If anyone would like to be a part of that, you may. I'm also happy I wear a lot of different hats, so I'm happy to go down there and do that as well. But doing, similar education down here, we just need to make sure we hit the confluence right over here. And then the bulk of the grant is we're going to have the 5, 6, the 5th and 6th graders are going to do a hut trip up to Carter Notch Hut and spend 3 days doing water quality assessments and looking at land management practices at the headwaters.
Wow.
So at the Carter Ponds. And we wrote it so it's fully paid for. So the students don't have to
That'd be a
pay
blast for the kids.
anything. And it's going to be in the spring. So it's like pretty excited. The Rivers Network wrote back and they're like, we're so excited. There's 4 or 5 community partners. It's got a lot of good things in it. And my intent is that the 2-3. No, I can't remember. It's the 2-3 is probably going to do some sort of school-wide presentation and perhaps even present to us on their findings. And the 5-6 is going to do a presentation to the selectmen and possibly also us as to the health. They're going to give us a health assessment of the Wildcat River. And also what I'm trying to do is we're charged, I don't know if you guys remember, but in the management plan, we're actually charged with doing water quality monitoring, which hasn't happened in I think 20 years maybe.
Yeah, like 86.
Maybe longer. So there are a couple parameters that are very doable for students. So there's water temperature, there's dissolved oxygen, and there was one other one. So they're gonna do that part as part of our. It's not annual. I can't remember how often it's supposed to be. Water quality monitoring as well. So should be fun.
Nice job, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great. Congrats.
I was psyched about it.
That's awesome.
And I wrote it so that I got to go on that trip too.
I was like, oh, I wonder if I'm the one.
It's going to be Miss Hill, I think. Miss Hill, Mr. Marshall, and I was like, I got money to go up to Carter as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it there.
Nice.
Anyway, so whenever they have those dates for the Confluence one, if anyone wants to come out and represent the Conservation Commission, you're welcome to. But it's gonna probably be in the morning, and so I recognize it's hard. So I might, if no one can do it, I might sneak out there.
Send out the dates.
Yeah, I'll definitely send out the dates.
Sounds good. As far as conservation easements go, the letters are out, and I think we just, at this point, are responsible for monitoring before the end of the year. And so I think everyone here knows what they're individually responsible for, and I guess if you have any questions or need anything from me, just let me know.
Do the communications have to, I guess, what I did last time is I just reached out to mine directly.
Yep.
So we can just, now letters are out,
Yep.
they've been given notice, and then we can go ahead and coordinate with them.
Yeah, if you want to coordinate with them, the Jackson Conservation Commission email is in the letter if they want to be present.
Just
you
to
can reach out.
jump on it, I'll get out.
Great.
Okay.
Sounds good. I don't have any updates as far as wetlands permits go. I don't have any new business. Does anybody, Pam?
Just one thought, I was talking with everybody out in the driveway a little bit. What about a community garden for the community?
That would be
And
great.
it'd be really nice out back there. You have water, it's flat. Just
I
a
really
thought.
like that idea.
It's just that there's a lot of groundhog, a lot of predation, and it might be nice to have an area that's accessible, that's flat.
It would look pretty too.
Yeah.
That's that right.
It's social. You need fencing, you need some, some decent soil, access maybe to manure. I don't know if anybody knows anybody who has access, but,
That's on that.
yeah, that's true. Do they have horses?
Yeah, huge amounts. I think they just have commercial taken away actually.
They don't have horses anymore.
Okay.
Oh, they do. That's on
Ground
that.
stables.
Oh, I'm sorry, with the, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, yeah.
there's still horses down there.
They don't offer horseback riding
Right,
anymore, but they
right.
do have horses with
Yeah.
their carriage rides.
So,
I really like that idea.
maybe there's some grants, or maybe we can use conservation funds, because obviously you have to have fencing. You've got
Yeah.
to Maybe put a water.
The
line.
library might be interested in that as
I
well.
was gonna say maybe good to reach out to them because I know they use that space for programs.
The composting pilot projects, we get rid of all the grass.
Yeah. Could
I-
we
A bunch of
plant some fruit trees?
I do remember looking into a couple of grant sources last year for that kind of thing, because I think probably all of you were here when the farmer for Thompson House came in and wanted to talk about composting there, and I helped out a little bit with, they did end up getting a little program going later in the fall that year, and then COVID happened the following year, and I think it was just not a good time for people to be bringing things to one spot, and the restaurant was closed for a period of time. So I think that has petered out, but I do remember finding a couple of small grant programs that were directed to things like that. So
Cool.
I don't think that the Thompson House as a private business was eligible for them, but we certainly would be.
The town would be,
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Smiley Farms.
Why not?
Yeah, actually,
There's Smiley Milk
Yes.
already.
So
watch
who
out.
here would be interested in a community garden plot?
I would. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be
absolutely.
interested in helping, but I
Yeah,
don't need another.
got your plot, yeah.
How do we want to push that forward? Because I would like to make that happen.
Well, I
You know,
guess,
I might suggest that you first, maybe like in Jackson E-News, put out and ask. I mean,
Yeah.
because a lot of people have enough land to have a garden on their own.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to just ask people, do you think it's a good idea? I think the question to really ask is who out there would seriously do it? Because you could spin your wheels and spend a lot of time and
Oh, yeah.
realize you run your own garden, I run my own garden, Dick's family runs its own garden, and they all say, yes, I think it's a great idea, but when you got around to who's gonna actually come down and do it, you might
Yeah.
find that there's a lot of people, and you might find there's hardly anybody
Mhm.
in this town. I think, if you're in the Bronx or something, it's a different ballgame, but I think it would be worth first just
Investigate.
finding out how many people are interested in actually participating
Mhm.
in a community garden as opposed to how many think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because the
and-
latter question will get
Yeah,
100%
that's a good
yes.
point.
And presenting some, like, not, I don't want to say a template, but just to help people understand what that might be.
Yeah.
Because the Bartlett, have you guys seen the one in Bartlett?
yeah.
You know, I mean, just so people can get a grasp of like, oh, this is overwhelming, or they raised beds, like, what is it exactly?
Have they had good participation there? I mean,
I
that's,
believe so.
When I was
It
there
looked
2 weeks ago,
well
like,
used.
yeah, most of the, I mean, not all the raised beds, but a lot of them, and there were like probably like a dozen people there working
Yeah,
every
yeah.
Saturday
How
morning.
many plots do they have?
I don't know.
I don't know,
Yeah.
a bunch,
Yeah, they had a lot. I was surprised how many it was.
I think.
Would have to be all fenced.
I wasn't looking.
that's
at
at the
any-
Stony Marl.
Yeah.
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 Who manages that program?
It's Bartlett Park, I think.
Yeah.
The rec department?
Yeah, I think it's all the, I assume it's the rec department. I mean, the rec department does the trails and all the other stuff there, so I assume it's them as
And
well.
that's part of the reasons why I ask is, for these things to work, it's no different than I watched at AMC, is you can run a big volunteer program, but if you don't have permanent staff behind it,
Mm.
and I'm sure you run the same thing at Tin Mountain to do all the organizing and that,
Mhm.
and, they can fall apart real quick.
Yeah.
The demographic, I don't know how many full-time people are, but it'd be like the condos. If you live at the condos, then you don't really have a place to garden.
Right.
Right.
So that would be like the kind of,
Or if you live on a slope, you don't have a place to garden because everything just rolls over.
But it gets around to it's one thing to build it, it's easy to build anything, it's another thing to have somebody who's gonna organize and run it year
Right.
after year.
Right, right, right.
And pay some sort of a usage fee.
Yeah,
Yeah, and upkeep it.
because
So-
Bartlett does have basically a hired rec person to oversee that program.
Yeah.
Right, they can send town staff out there if something happens, like if
Yeah.
something breaks or something.
Yeah.
Right, fix water.
That's still a good idea.
Yeah, I just
And
don't-
maybe it starts really small, and maybe it's something that would be sustainable even if it pulled out and it wasn't used as community gardens. Maybe it becomes, you know, some perennial type thing down the road that just self-sustains and it's beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's true.
Do we want to send out
Yeah.
an initial, who would be interested?
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, or draft up some.
Yeah. I'm not sure how you get a response. You put it on the e-news, and how do you get a response to?
You can put down an email as to who they should respond back to.
Yeah, I mean, you're at a good time of the year. I mean, maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe no one's planting for the following year, not even this year. But, you know, who knows?
We're just planning for the next.
Yeah, I
growing
mean, you
season.
have to start slow. You're not.
Yeah.
So can we put in an email to the Jackson Conservation Commission? email?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
That's a good idea.
Do you want to do that, Pam? Or?
I can,
Okay.
I mean, what's the question you want to ask? Because I can ask Leslie to put it on the e-news.
The Jackson Conservation Commission has had initial discussions about starting a community garden plot and is curious about who in the area would be
Yeah.
interested in
And participating in it.
Right.
participating.
Maybe vegetables, flowers. Doesn't have to be vegetables. Some people just have to grow flowers.
And if interested, please reply. And if interested in participating, right?
Yeah, I'd use the word
Yeah.
participating, yeah.
Yeah.
In participating, you know, please reply to, what's the email?
Jackson.m. Hold on a second. Let's see. Probably should
No,
know.
It'll come up as soon as you type in the first two letters.
jacksonnh.cc@gmail.com. I just have it forwarded to my personal
Okay,
email.
so
So
it's Jackson NH.
.cc@gmail.
Okay, thanks.
And I would hold off on saying any kind of location or anything.
Right.
Yeah,
Just- Yeah,
I wouldn't want to ruffle any feathers if people at the
Yeah.
library are like, what, that's where we set up the tent for the
Right.
thing. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well,
That is town land, isn't it?
that is.
That's what I thought.
it's part of the
Yeah.
35 acres.
I mean, there's like a map that shows what was proposed to happen in this space.
You mean
That's-
housing development?
Well, I think that was like where the new police station was
Oh,
supposed to be.
yeah.
It was like a
So they said,
three-dimensional watercolor thing somewhere around here.
so I think somebody was talking about affordable housing back there or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, others may know more than I think somebody just,
Did they get something to have to apply for it?
I didn't see that it
Tossing
had a
around.
lot of legs. For something like that to happen, somebody's gotta really be a driving force behind it as opposed to just, here's a good idea, why don't people run with it?
Yeah.
Somebody.
Well, it's come up every 2 years. That I think you
I had a
better off-
hotel at the corner of the bridge there, and
That's what everybody kept saying, why don't you just, you know, modify that and make it, you know, affordable housing, but,
It's not glamorous.
you know, but it's on the water,
Yeah.
and it's a nice backyard.
Oh, yeah.
probably be cheaper than trying to go from scratch here.
Oh, yeah. Big job. Yeah, a lot of people used to, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, there was a bunch of people renting places there for seasonal.
Huh?
I know a lot of people who lived in there. The hotel just across the covered bridge, you know, go across the covered bridge, take a look.
Oh, yeah.
That had, you know, like people who stayed there, I don't know, years or seasonal, 6 months at a time.
I'm not sure that's not what's happening now. It's
I
think it might
think
be.
there is a little bit
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
I think they're short, yeah, the owners have a daughter who's in school with my daughter, and it's
Oh.
great. And so, yeah, they I think there is some like longer term seasonal rentals available.
Yeah. That might not fit low income though. Right.
Dick?
I was gonna make a motion.
Sure.
We about done?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we should go home. Thanks, Ashis.
Okay, Dick has made the motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Pam. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
I abstain.
Yeah.
Want to stay